If you grew up in the 80s and loved wrestling, chances are you remember the epic battles between Dusty Rhodes and the Four Horsemen. In the mid-1980s, professional wrestling was red hot, and no rivalry burned brighter than Dusty Rhodes versus the Four Horsemen. This feud wasn't just about titles, it was personal, violent, and controversial. Built on betrayal and fueled by unmatched charisma, this rivalry is remembered as one of the greatest in wrestling history. The seeds of this iconic feud were planted on November 6, 1985, at the Omni in Atlanta, Georgia. Dusty Rhodes, famously known as the American Dream, was already a massive star. He was locked in an intense battle with Ric Flair over the prestigious NWA World Heavyweight Championship. Fans saw Dusty as the blue-collar hero, the man of the people, while Flair was the flashy, arrogant champion with a golden belt and a matching lifestyle. That night, something unexpected happened. During a cage match, Flair found himself in trouble. Rivals Ole and Arn Anderson attacked him, and it looked like Flair was going to take a serious beating. Then out of nowhere, Dusty Rhodes ran to the ring. Fans thought Dusty was about to save Flair, showing that even bitter rivals could have respect for one another. But what happened next left everyone stunned. Instead of teaming up with Dusty, Flair and the Andersons turned on him. They beat Dusty mercilessly inside the steel cage. This betrayal wasn't just a shocking moment, it was a declaration of war. That night, Ric Flair officially joined forces with Ole and Arn Anderson. Later, Tully Blanchard joined them, and together they formed a faction that would dominate wrestling for years, the Four Horsemen. Now the question is, who were the Four Horsemen? The Four Horsemen weren't just another group of wrestlers. They were something entirely different. They were bold, arrogant, and unapologetic. They strutted around in tailored suits, bragged about their wealth, and lived by one rule: dominate and destroy anyone who dared to challenge them. Whether in the ring or behind the scenes, they made sure their presence was felt. Ric Flair was the leader, the loud and proud champion who oozed charisma. The Andersons, Ole and Arn, were tough, no-nonsense fighters who did the dirty work. And Tully Blanchard was the cocky, ruthless mastermind who always seemed to have a trick up his sleeve. Together, they were a force to be reckoned with, and they made sure Dusty Rhodes became their #1 target. While the Horsemen were the ultimate villains, Dusty Rhodes was the ultimate hero. Dusty wasn't just a wrestler, he was a voice for the common man. With his thick Southern accent, passionate speeches, and famous lisp, Dusty connected with fans in a way few wrestlers ever have. He called himself the American Dream, and he represented the struggles, hopes, and dreams of everyday people. Dusty's promos were legendary. He didn't just talk about wrestling, he talked about life. He talked about factory workers losing their jobs, families struggling to make ends meet, and the hardships that people faced every day. When Dusty spoke, fans felt like he was speaking directly to them. He was their champion, both in the ring and in spirit. On September 29, 1986, during a television taping, the Four Horsemen ambushed Dusty in the ring. They didn't just beat him up, they made it personal. Targeting Dusty's leg, they used a steel chair to inflict as much damage as possible. The attack was so brutal that Dusty was sidelined for weeks. Fans were outraged. They flooded the NWA with letters and calls demanding justice for their hero. To them, this wasn't just wrestling, it felt real. But the violence didn't stop there. In October 1986, the Horsemen ambushed Dusty in a parking lot. This wasn't a scripted match. It was a cold, calculated attack. They surrounded Dusty and beat him down with ruthless precision. Then, in one of the most shocking moments of the feud, they broke Dusty's arm and left him lying in the parking lot. This entire assault was caught on camera and aired on television, sending shockwaves through the wrestling world. While it added drama to the feud, it also raised questions about how far wrestling storylines should go. Many fans thought the violence had crossed the line, but for Dusty, it was just another reason to keep fighting. During this dark period, Dusty delivered one of the most iconic promos in wrestling history, the Hard Times speech. Standing in front of the camera, Dusty didn't just talk about wrestling, he talked about life. He spoke about people losing their jobs to machines, about struggling families, and about the hardships faced by the working class. This wasn't just a promo, it was a rallying cry. Dusty wasn't just fighting the Horsemen, he was fighting for everyone who had ever felt defeated or overlooked. Fans rallied behind him like never before, and the feud with the Horsemen reached its boiling point. With emotions running high, Dusty and the Horsemen needed a stage big enough to settle their feud. That was when the WarGames happened, a brutal match concept created by Dusty himself. The first WarGames match took place on July 4th, 1987, during the Great American Bash Tour in Atlanta, Georgia. The match was unlike anything fans had ever seen. Two teams entered a massive steel cage, and the only way to win was to force the other team to surrender. Dusty teamed up with Nikita Koloff, the Road Warriors, and Paul Ellering to take on the Horsemen. The match was chaos. Bloody, violent, and unforgettable. It was the perfect end of their bitter rivalry. By the late 1980s, the epic feud between Dusty Rhodes and the Four Horsemen started to fade as wrestling moved into new storylines. Dusty had a few big wins against the Horsemen, especially in the brutal WarGames matches where his team often came out on top. But there wasn't a clear final showdown. Instead, the rivalry naturally ran its course, and the wrestlers went on to focus on other opponents and directions in their careers. The Four Horsemen stayed active as a group for a while, but over time, members came and went, and their magic wasn't quite the same. Dusty also shifted his focus, stepping out of the ring more often to work behind the scenes and help shape the future of wrestling. Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, became one of the most respected and beloved figures in wrestling, even after his in-ring career slowed down. He worked behind the scenes in many wrestling promotions, including WCW, TNA, and WWE, helping craft stories and develop new talent. One of Dusty's most important roles was as a mentor for young wrestlers in WWE's developmental system. He helped shape the careers of many modern stars like Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns, and Becky Lynch. Wrestlers often talked about how Dusty's advice and encouragement pushed them to succeed. Dusty passed away in 2015, leaving behind a legacy that's still felt in wrestling today. His sons, Dustin Goldust and Cody Rhodes, have continued his legacy as wrestlers, with Cody now playing a big role in AEW, a major wrestling promotion Dusty would have been proud of. Ric Flair, the leader of the Four Horsemen, kept wrestling for many years after the feud. Flair became one of the most celebrated wrestlers in history, winning a record 16 world championships and entertaining fans with his flashy style and unforgettable charisma. Flair officially retired in 2008 after a memorable match against Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 24. Even after retiring, Flair stayed involved in wrestling, mentoring younger wrestlers, and making special appearances. Today, Flair is seen as one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, though his personal life has had its share of challenges. The Four Horsemen evolved over time, with new members like Barry Windham and Lex Luger joining the group. However, the original lineup of Flair, Arn Anderson, Ole Anderson, and Tully Blanchard remains the most iconic version. Arn Anderson became a respected backstage producer, helping wrestlers behind the scenes in WWE and later AEW. Tully Blanchard also returned to wrestling as a manager in AEW, working with young talent. Ole Anderson retired from wrestling and stayed out of the public eye, while other members like Barry Windham faced health challenges after their careers. In 2012, the Four Horsemen were inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, honoring their incredible impact on wrestling. The Dusty Rhodes versus the Four Horsemen feud wasn't just a wrestling rivalry. It was a story that touched people on a personal level. Dusty wasn't just a wrestler. He was the guy you could root for because he represented the struggles of everyday life. He wasn't flashy or perfect. He was real. On the other side, the Four Horsemen were the ultimate villains. They were cocky, rich, and ruthless, doing whatever it took to stay on top. What made this feud special was how deeply fans connected to it. Dusty was fighting not just for himself, but for all the people who felt like underdogs in their own lives. When the Horsemen beat Dusty down, fans felt his pain. When Dusty got back up and delivered one of his fiery, heartfelt speeches, it felt like a win for everyone. This rivalry gave us some of wrestling's most unforgettable moments. Dusty's Hard Times promo wasn't just about wrestling, it was about life. Speaking to workers and families struggling to make ends meet, it's still considered one of the greatest promos of all time. The WarGames matches, which Dusty himself created, brought an unmatched level of intensity and drama to wrestling. Even today, WarGames matches are a fan favorite, with WWE recently bringing them back at Survivor Series. Though the feud ended decades ago, its impact is still felt today. Dusty Rhodes left a lasting mark not only as a wrestler, but as a mentor and creative mind. After stepping back from the ring, he worked behind the scenes in WWE and other promotions, helping shape the future of wrestling. Many of today's biggest stars, like Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns, credit Dusty for guiding their careers. Sadly, Dusty passed away in 2015, but his legacy lives on, especially through his sons, Dustin Goldust and Cody Rhodes. Cody, in particular, has taken his father's influence to heart. He helped create AEW, All Elite Wrestling, a major wrestling company that carries on Dusty's spirit of innovation and connection with fans. Dusty's creativity and passion for storytelling are a huge part of why wrestling is what it is today. The Four Horsemen also left a lasting legacy. Ric Flair, their leader, went on to become one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, winning 16 world championships and cementing his place as a wrestling icon. Even after retiring from the ring, Flair remains a beloved figure in wrestling, though his personal life has had its ups and downs. Arn Anderson became a respected backstage producer, working with younger wrestlers in WWE and now AEW. Tully Blanchard also returned to wrestling as a manager, bringing his old-school mindset to modern talent. While Ole Anderson stepped away from the spotlight after retiring, the Horsemen as a group are still celebrated as one of the most influential factions in wrestling history. In 2012, they were inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, a well-deserved honor for their contributions to the sport. The Dusty Rhodes versus the Four Horsemen feud might have ended, but its influence is everywhere. Modern wrestling factions like the Bloodline and the Shield clearly take inspiration from the Horsemen's mix of dominance, swagger, and teamwork. Dusty's legacy lives on not only through his sons, but also through the countless wrestlers he mentored and the fans he inspired. At its heart, this rivalry was about more than wrestling. Dusty's message of never giving up, no matter how tough life gets, is something everyone can relate to. The Horsemen represented the challenges we all face, whether it's a bully, a bad boss, or just life-throwing curveballs, and Dusty showed us how to stand up and fight back. Thanks for watching. If you love this look back at one of wrestling's most legendary rivalries, don't forget to give us a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more deep dives into wrestling history. Now we want to hear from you. What's your favorite moment from the Dusty Rhodes versus the Four Horsemen feud? Was it Dusty's Hard Times promo, the WarGames matches, or maybe just seeing Dusty take it to Ric Flair in the ring? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing your take. And don't stop here. Check out our playlist on iconic wrestling rivalries for more stories like this one. From Hogan versus Savage to Austin versus McMahon, we've got all the classics covered. Before we go, let's remember what made this feud so special. Dusty Rhodes versus the Four Horsemen wasn't just about wrestling, it was about life. It was about facing challenges, believing in yourself, and fighting back no matter what. That's why it still means so much to fans today. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Stay inspired, and as Dusty would say, keep dreaming big.